Isle of Trains proves once and for all that it's not the size of the box that matters, but what you do with it. The game has relatively few components, the rule set is pretty streamlined, and it is by no means a table hog, but through some absolutely brilliant design decisions, Isle of Trains is still able to deliver a gameplay experience with depth and interactivity that rivals those of much bigger games. In Isle of Trains, players will extend their trains by adding additional carts, load these up with all sorts of goods and passengers, and deliver these to different locations around the island to score victory points. To do this, you'll get two actions on your turn, and you'll select between building, loading, delivering, or just taking a cart or passenger from the supply. Let's talk about building first. In simplest terms possible, this is the action that lets you extend your train, upgrade existing cars, and build stations that provide additional endgame scoring conditions and bonuses. This would have been a pretty standard action you've seen 1,000 times before, if not for a single tweak: multi-use cards. This one design decision completely turns the whole thing on its head for me. You see, in Isle of Trains, cards represent three things: train cards, goods you can load on the train, and money. And they can also be fairly difficult to come by, though I'll talk a bit more about that later when we get to the load action. This means that every time you decide to use a card for one purpose, you are giving up the potential benefits you'd have gotten if you saved it for another. This can make the decision to extend your train absolutely agonizing at times, though I mean it in the best way possible, as you sit there deciding whether being able to carry one extra oil is really worth discarding 3 other cards, all of which look like they'd be very useful as well, or if perhaps you can wait a bit and get some other junk you can discard. Oh, but the new cards you just got are also pretty good, and they have the resources you need to make your deliveries. But then again, that one extra oil capacity could be just what you need to get a good engine going. You are constantly being pulled in different directions. Every choice you make has a huge opportunity cost attached to it, and it always feels like there are multiple great options available to you. And I don't know about you, but personally, it's stuff like this that makes me want to come back to the game and keep exploring and experimenting with its systems. Next, I really want to talk about the load action, because as brilliant as the multi-use cards are, what they've done with this action is downright genius. All you do here is load a good on a train. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be your train. Your initial reaction to this might be something along the lines of, "The fuck you're talking about? Why would I help an opponent to load their train up? This isn't a co-op." But this is where the big twist comes in. All the train cards you build have a special ability to them, but that ability does nothing for you. Instead, it activates for your opponent whenever they load a good or passenger on that card. So, for example, the take action is a very inefficient way to get more cards, wasting half your turn to get a single card, when instead you could load a good or passenger on someone else's train and get 2, 3, I think some might even give you 4 cards. Hell, some card abilities are so powerful they'll give you a bunch of cards and throw in some victory points, or even a free additional action on top as well. The benefits honestly become too tempting not to utilize at some point, and that's when you know you got your opponent exactly where you want them to be.
I'm gonna get you.
I'm gonna get you.
I'm gonna get you.
I'm gonna swim with you.
I'm gonna get you.
I'm gonna be your pet.
You may have been playing the game like you're a regular old Thomas the Tank Engine, all about working together and helping each other, but turns out in reality you're more of a
Diesel. The absolute fucking worst.
The best way to win Isle of Trains is not by turtling up, building your little train and loading it up all by yourself. No, instead you want to build a proper honey trap that gets the rest of the table loading your train up for you, while you spend your time on the more worthwhile activities like making deliveries and scoring points. All of this makes the core puzzle of Isle of Trains so much more fascinating. It adds an extra wrinkle when you're deciding which card to build, as you gotta balance out its usefulness to you and its attractiveness to other players. And it also means that players are constantly weighing up the benefits they get from loading someone else's card against the extra efficiency they're giving that opponent. However, though I absolutely love this element of the game, it's also where some of my gripes with Isle of Trains come from. It ain't exactly easy to tell what the benefits of your opponent's cards are, especially at higher player counts when people are sitting across the table miles away from you and you have to either try and figure it out upside down or keep asking them what their cards do, which feels clunky and really hurts the pace of the game. It also isn't helped by the fact that some of the iconography, as well as their accompanying descriptions in the rulebook, are a lot less clear than others. Like, I've played this game about 6 or 7 times now, and I'm honestly still not entirely sure how these ones work. They sound like they should be ongoing, but that also seems far too overpowered. But if they're just for your next action, then they seem hardly worth it instead. But don't take this to mean that the entire rulebook is poorly written and unclear. Quite the opposite actually, as I found that it explained the flow of the game really well, with plenty of pictorial examples and just enough detail to get you intrigued about seeing the mechanisms play out in real life. As for theme, though Isle of Trains is not exactly a themeless game, and I particularly like the whole idea around the limiting factor to how many carts you can build being the capacity of your engine, effectively translating the simple fact that you're gonna need more power to be able to pull the heavier load, I can't really see the theme being the reason you keep coming back to Isle of Trains. No, that'll most definitely come down to whether you like the multi-use carts and the game's approach to interactivity. Finally, since I love me a game that looks good and feels better, let's talk art and components. When it comes to art, Isle of Trains does not disappoint, delivering a vibrant, cartoony style that really pops on the table and brings life to an otherwise pretty bland theme. It also has this super simple but ridiculously great idea to actually have you build the titular Isle of Trains out of a few cards that each then represent a different location where you go to complete your orders. It may be far from groundbreaking, but I really appreciated having an actual visual representation of the locations my train was traveling to, instead of some cards with some text about the orders I needed to complete. Components-wise, there won't be anything to blow you away, unless you got the deluxe version with the wooden meeples. There's also nothing to really complain about. The card quality is good, and both the cards and the rulebook have a nice linen finish to them. The tokens punch out easily and seem thick enough to last, and the cloth bag serves its purpose well. I really enjoyed my time with Isle of Trains. Sure, I have a few minor niggles, but they are more than made up for by the brilliant implementation of multi-use cards and the refreshing take on player interaction. The game has way more depth than what you'd expect from this smaller box, and finding new ways to approach its puzzle continues to be exciting even as you experience more of what the game has to offer. It would be an easy recommendation on merit alone, but when you factor in the fact that you can pick this up for around £20, it's basically a no-brainer.